have our three fabulous advisors here that are going to introduce themselves. And Kate, would you mind starting?
Sure. So I'm Kate Vanderkalk, and some of you I have met already, but those of you who haven't, it's great to meet you. I'm glad you're here.
And Jackie?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jackie Abeda, again, one of the advisors, and just welcome you to the session. Thanks for being with us.
And Sean?
Hello, everyone. Camera not working, so you get my professional picture here, but I'm Sean Jenkins, and I also serve as one of your lead team advisors.
So we're thankful that you decided to join us today. There's going to be a lot of content, and we will be sharing some of that content in the chat feature. But we also want to use the chat feature to answer any questions. So things may go quickly, and we hope to get to all of our content. But if you have questions, we do want to make sure those are addressed, and we'll stay on afterward to make sure all of your questions are answered. So again, welcome. And I am going to start sharing the PowerPoint. Just 1 minute. Can everyone see that?
Yep, looks great, Shannon.
Great. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what the committees are looking for in the essay. We're going to have a hands-on activity of the elements of writing a scholarship essay, and we'll be sharing these activities again in the chat feature, so that way you can look at it, review it, save it, make this resource available to everyone. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Abeda.
Hi everyone. Again, it's nice to see you. If you are inclined and want to turn on your video, I love seeing faces, so please feel comfortable doing that. If not, we're fine with your picture as well. We do have a lot of information to get through today. Hopefully you have a pen and paper, because there are some really good tips that you're going to want to write down. And Shannon, if we can go ahead and go to the next slide.
What catches the interest of scholarship committee? Is that not what you're seeing?
Okay, yes, sorry. So basically we want to talk about what really are these committees looking for. They're looking for your individual story. Every one of you has a unique professional story, a personal story, and so that needs to shine through in these essays. We want to know what types of leadership roles you've taken in your community, in your work environment, or even in your classroom environment. Your essay could determine the difference between you getting a scholarship, even if you don't have an outstanding GPA. So remember, the essay can make a big difference. The other important fact is to really pay attention to all of the requirements of the scholarship so that it speaks directly to the donor's interests. So what are the elements of a winning scholarship essay? This is what your essay should include, these 6 elements, and we'll dive into each one of them a little bit here in a little bit. So the introduction, your family, an obstacle or an accomplishment, your community service, your life purpose, and then the conclusion. So with the introduction, this is the point where you're starting to catch your reader's attention. So make sure that it stands out. You can create a description of a scene, you can ask a question, or I always like when an essay is opened up with maybe a quote that speaks to you. It can be positive, it can be something that related to an obstacle that you've overcome. The most important key though is never start your essay out with, hello, my name is Jackie. Family. Family is really important. So why does the committee want to know about your family? Well, your family has started to shape and is part of your history. So include things like ethnic backgrounds, country of origins, number of family members that you might have, your brothers, your sisters, maybe your family's or parents' educational attainment. Be specific, include things about your spouse. If you're part of a military family and you've moved around, those are really important things to share with the committee so that we get to know who you are as a person. It's also important with family to describe any of your personal circumstances, like if you're a single parent, if you've overcome, an obstacle like homelessness or some other event that has really defined and shaped where you are in your life today. We like to talk about obstacles a lot, and we make the assumption that folks have to overcome something traumatic in their lives. That's not always the case. Sometimes that we have an accomplishment that we're super proud of, whether it's something at work that we've done, something in our own communities, but don't always look at obstacles as a negative thing. It can be a positive thing. But in this, we want to think about how has that obstacle or accomplishment really defined where you're going or what you've done. What character qualities have you learned from overcoming or accomplishing such an event? How has this made you stronger, more resilient, a better person, more determined? How has it given you a life purpose? So this is a place that you can also share. Maybe you've done a really great research project, or you've done a really great team building project in one of your classes that you're proud of because you were the leader of that group. That's a time that you really want to start to shine and show those different skill sets. Community service, we always say, think about community service in a way that isn't just a list of things that you're doing. As adult learners, we all know that you're busy. You've got multiple responsibilities, you're doing lots of things, but you're likely giving back in ways that maybe you don't even recognize. So maybe it's in your professional environment. What ways are you contributing to your teammates, your colleagues? Maybe it's in your church. Are you giving back in a way based on some personal support systems? So relate your community service back to your story about who you are, why you give back, and highlight those different areas. Keep in mind, it's not a list. Again, it's just to help really show the committee who you are as a person and what your goals and aspirations are. The life purpose and interest, we all know that adult learners have unique journeys. Educational attainment journeys, professional attainments, all kinds of unique journeys in life. So this is where you really want to start to shine. So start to talk about how you have, at this point in your life, made a difference in maybe other folks' lives as well. But what have you learned about yourself as you've moved through your personal or your professional journey? How has this shaped you? And why are you looking to get a scholarship or even continue your education? Those are all really important facts that we would want to learn about you specifically. The conclusion should be the clincher. So this is where you really tell us, why do you even need this scholarship? Lots of folks think that, well, maybe I shouldn't include that. My financial aid has run out. Absolutely, you want to include that. Tell the committee that you need this funding. Has your work environment changed? Have you recently gone through a layoff or been furloughed or hours cut? It's not always just about, I need the money. There's oftentimes a reason as to why we target scholarships. So don't be afraid to share that with the committee. And then your last sentence, just show your determination, your resilience, your strength, and close out your essay that way.
And this is all in one page, right, Jackie?
Yeah, unless the scholarship allows you to do more than one page, you really want to try and aim for a page to a page and a half, because committees have to read through many essays. So being targeted and specific in each of these elements is really important. So if anything, remember, a winning scholarship essay is your story. So include, adjectives to describe colors, details, personal. It should be free of grammatical errors. Use peer readers, use family members to read over your essay before you submit it. But also we'll talk a little bit more about resources that Grand Valley provides that you could utilize as well. A couple of other things to note is that you want to make sure you follow the directions of the scholarship. So if the scholarship is specifically asking you to talk about your leadership skills, you want to drive your story around the skills and things that they're asking for. Again, try not to be longer than a page unless it states that you can go above a one page, but a page to a page and a half is really what you're aiming for. And don't be afraid to be personal. It's okay. These aren't tear-jerking stories. These are your lives. And you need to get across in a one page or 1.5 page who you are as a person.
Just to emphasize again that if they are allowing for longer than one page, you don't want to put a 3-page essay together. The people that are reading these have a ton of them to read, and it will often get overlooked. So you really want to focus on the important areas.
Good news is too, to add, once you've done the work and you've started to put this together, and we're going to kind of get into some of that and how you do the work, but once you've done that, you can often then use these for multiple scholarships. You know, and you'll find, and I think Jackie kind of talked about this, that you may need to tweak it. You know, you want to look at the specifics. If one scholarship has this one specific question they want you to address, you know, you want to make sure you address that, but you can use what you put together as the base, and then you can start to tweak that and build on it and use that same one for multiple scholarship essays. I will say, speaking of someone who's read scholarship essays, just make sure the one thing you want to make sure you tweak is the title. You know, don't say I'm applying for X scholarship when you're really applying for Y and you didn't change that, but that you can absolutely use the base that you start to build with us today for multiple essays.
Great. Yes, thanks, Kate. Super important. Make sure you check that title. I also think that it's sometimes we sit down and we have to write these essays, it can feel overwhelming. So we put in the chat feature a downloadable packet that will help you just get started on kind of how to start formulating your essay. These are really hands-on exercises, and we'll start to talk through some of them today, but I encourage you to take it and utilize this tool to help build off your scholarship story in the future. But the number one thing you want to think about is, what do you want people to know about you? Sometimes it's really hard to say, I don't know, what should they know about me? And this exercise is about looking beyond just what we think of ourselves and maybe asking the people that are influential in our lives what they think about us. So ask your best friend, what do you think best describes me? Or a professor, what words would you use to describe me? This is going to get at really the skills that you want to highlight of yourself. So perhaps maybe your family will say, you're a really empathetic, great listener. Or your professors might say, you're a leader, you're a natural leader, whether you see it or not. Your best friend might tell you, yeah, you're a good listener, but you know, you tend to over communicate. So there's lots that we can learn from the people in our lives and help to bring out those skill sets that we want to show. The second piece that we want to talk about is, and I think that's exercise 2 here. What skills are you most proud of? So when we think about things, what accomplishments have we done in our lives, or what obstacles have we overcome that we're really proud of, that make us feel good, that we've grown from, or that have shaped us? So things might, for example, maybe you're the first in your family to go to college. Maybe you won a unique award through your community or a presentation, or even through your work, you were highlighted and recognized for some contribution. If you've overcome a difficult situation, if you've showed leadership and resiliency and empathy, those are all things and skill sets that you should be proud of and want to really define. We have included, and we will include in the chat feature, a list of descriptive qualities for success. Those will help you really start to define what those skill sets could be or could look like for you. I think it's a really nice list of a lot of beautiful adjectives and things that we can utilize to help kind of develop our writing too. And so now I'm going to let Kate take over and explain the last 2 portions of the elements.
So, you know, Jackie kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but a big part of this is telling your story, right? And so as we continue to think about that story, it's thinking about the skill sets, and what are you really good at, and what do you want to talk about? And I think this is a part that I see overlooked often. So one of the big things with Grand Valley scholarships, and I know we're not just applying for Grand Valley scholarships. In fact, we strongly encourage that you also apply for local scholarships. We talked about that a little bit last week, if you were able to come to our webinar last week. You're fine. But when you apply for Grand Valley scholarships, one of the first things you do is you fill out there's a general application portion that you fill out. So in addition to submitting your personal statement, you're going to fill out a general application, and they talk about, there's a part to talk about your skill sets and your leadership experience. And people skip this often, but I would encourage you to not skip this, because reviewers look at that. And I think where I see non-traditional students and adult learners often skipping that is because they say, well, you know, I mean, I'm not the captain of the intramural sports team or whatever. But don't think about it that way, right? Think about the things you're doing and you're contributing. You know, are you the, you know, chair of the PTA committee? Did you, you know, you can see some examples, you know, maybe you led up the walking team, or you're on one of the committees at work for, you know, intercultural awareness, or there's so many ways that you can think about this. But think about those skill sets you have and what is it that you want to highlight. You know, particularly, you know, all the things we know, those skill sets that we know are really valuable, your communication skills, your team building skills. Those are all the ways that we want to highlight this. And in a way, it's thinking about your resume, right? Those words you'd use if you were writing a resume, just translate it into writing this scholarship essay. The other big thing, of course, is, as Jackie talked about, either barriers you've overcome or things you're really proud of that you've done in your life. You know, how did it specifically, and how it's related to your educational journey, right? How did that kind of affect you as you were coming back to school? You know, we see lots of different stories, whether that's people who, you know, maybe they or a family member had, you know, some sort of illness, or, you know, single parents who have, you know, in addition to career, work, school, balancing all of that, you know, every single one of you I know has a story. You know, there's a reason you're back here. So what is that story, and why are you here, and what is it that's going to set your application apart? Your stories are important, and we want to hear them. We want to help think about what it is. Don't discount any part of your story, and think about how you can tell that story. So all of those parts and pieces all come together in a nice short way. It's hard to, I think sometimes it's best to, if you can start to think about them all first, and then how do you want to put them together? And then of course, how at the very end, wrapping it all up with, how is this scholarship then going to impact you if you were to win it, right? But all of those parts and pieces come together to kind of form that winning scholarship essay. So those are the things that I think are the main components. And then, of course, once it's done and you've written your essay, there are sometimes, not always, but sometimes other parts and pieces that are required. So some essays will also ask for things like recommendation letters. And I'm going to turn it over to Sean to kind of speak a little bit to that.
Hello, everyone. In terms of the recommendation letters, I want to talk about this area, but I also in terms of Jackie and Kate, they talk you through the parts of putting together your scholarship. And now that you have put your scholarship together, before I get off into the how to ask for a letter, I did want to actually talk just a little bit about the resources for writing. Now that you put it together, Grand Valley has a writing center. So you are welcome to take advantage of our writing center. They will critique your writing for you. They'll help you, and they'll give you feedback. And then in terms of the actual letter for recommendation, the ask first, meaning that person that you're thinking of asking for this letter of recommendation, you want to make sure that you reach out to them, that they know that you are asking them to recommend you for the scholarship. One of the things that catches all of us off guard is when a student does not ask us and they submit us for a recommendation. And on the end of the student, you want to make sure that you have a great relationship with that person that you're asking. So if I'm caught off guard, maybe you thought that I was going to give you a glowing recommendation, and maybe I felt that you were subpar, and I give you a different recommendation. So you want to make sure that you do that ask first. And that goes into select someone who knows you well and can describe your strengths. Often students will ask people for recommendations that they don't have a relationship with. they worked with them or they know them, but they didn't get a chance to learn the strengths of the student. And so you want to make sure that you are asking someone that knows your strengths. I can speak personally in terms of I often get students that will ask me for a recommendation that I may have met once or twice along their academic pathway. And I really cannot speak to the strengths. So you definitely want to make sure that it's someone that knows you. Give them some lead time. Writing strong and meaningful letters takes quite a bit of time, 2 weeks to a month. So once again, if your letter is due tomorrow or your application is due tomorrow and you contact your recommendation person, I'll just say you contact me and you say, can you get this to me by tomorrow? And that's not unheard of because we often get that we'll get a short time, a short window where a student will say, I need a recommendation and I need it by tomorrow or I need it 3 days from now. So to be fair to that person that's writing the recommendation and they can give you a strong recommendation, make sure that you give them enough time. And we also get it that sometimes you don't have enough time because maybe you just found this scholarship and it's a short window. So don't back off and say, well, I'm not going to ask anybody because I know I only have 3 days to put it together. We still recommend that you go forth and ask. But if indeed you know that you've been writing this a month in advance, make sure that you identify your recommendation people in time as well. It's okay to give them a gentle reminder a week before the deadline if they have not submitted their recommendation. Sometimes we as staff and even faculty, our loads are a bit heavy, and sometimes we do kind of move things lower and on the list of things that need to be done. And so it's okay to say, hey, my recommendation is due next week. um, just want to remind you that you said you would write one for me. So that's okay to do that. It's okay to put that ask out there again. Always send a thank you expressing your appreciation for their time and support of your application. Also keep them updated on the outcome of your application. We put our hearts into supporting you as students. And so therefore we do like the feedback to say, thank you. Also in terms of, we want to know that you are successful in receiving that scholarship. So as part of your community, we do like the feedback to let us know that, yes, I did get that scholarship. Or even if it was a no, I didn't get that one, maybe we can support you and encourage you to still write the next one. Um, and so you just want to consider these points in terms of how to properly ask for a letter of recommendation. So now you're going to find a template placed in the chat, and it'll take just a minute to download and that you can save to your computer or your own device. Thank you, letter.
Yep, so I just wanted to make a quick mention too about the template. So I know that some students might be going through 6-week accelerated classes, but it's also an important time for you to start to develop relationships with your faculty advisors as well as your professional advisors, because they will be resources for you down the road. And so the template that is in the chat feature allows you to help your professional advisor as well as your faculty advisor know what skills you want them to talk about. And so that's why we encourage the use of that template, because like Sean said, sometimes we don't know all the stories and we don't know exactly what you want us to highlight about you. And so giving that heads up to your recommender is really important.
Or even just to highlight a different skill set. Say you want your faculty advisor to highlight your coursework and a project that you did, but you want your professional advisor to, they know the struggles that you've had because you've worked with them in a different way. So it also helps to change up the skills that you want highlighted. So that way the readers have different perspectives of you.
I also want to add too, again, in terms of the Writing Center, if you're stuck with your ideas, the Writing Center, it can help you with your ideas as well. So I do know for students in the lead, for all students, the Writing Center has a 72-hour turnaround time that they'll get stuff back out to you. But if indeed you mention that you are a part of the LEADS program, that turnaround time is even less because they look at you as an accelerated student and that the process needs to be quicker. So please use your resources with the Writing Center, and then also the other resource that you can use is the Career Service that also helps students and support them with writing tips as well. So in terms of thank you letters, once again, you want to make sure that you get a thank you letter out. Or it doesn't have to necessarily be a letter. It could be even be in the form of a card. But where you're applying to, you want to thank the scholarship committee.
And on that note too, many of these scholarships are, Grand Valley has over 500 different scholarships, and some of them are endowed scholarships, and some of them are memorial scholarships. So these are generous donors who want to give back and support your education. And it's really important that we recognize that. So a simple thank you can often be shared with the family. And I know that it does mean a lot to those folks.
Now I'm gonna open up to everybody. Questions?
And you can always just put a question in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question either way.
And now's your time, because many of us have sat on scholarship committees, so we can give you some inside tips. This is your opportunity.
Hi, this is Jessica Malinowski. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about when to apply for a scholarship and when to, step back and say, I don't really meet that criteria. Like, there's grade point averages, there's financial need. So when do you really kind of hone in on whether you should, yes or no, apply for those?
Yeah, I'll take that question. We always recommend that even if you don't meet every single criteria, that you still consider applying. Sometimes scholarships don't get applicants, and therefore the money just has to sit there and unfortunately not be given away. So if you meet 2 of the 3 criteria, or you can align some way to maybe that third criteria, we encourage your application. So don't ever say, I have to meet every single piece here to be eligible for this. If you think you qualify for it, submit.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I'll give maybe two good examples that I think illustrate that. So there's one scholarship out there. This is my secret scholarship, so you guys get my secret one since you're here on the call. But there's one out there that I think a lot of people don't apply to because they just read. So it's I'm going to mess up the name. It's the Suber Coverall. I think it's the Coverall some memorial. I'll find the name and I'll drop it in the chat. But essentially, it's like people who work at the Suber Model Coverall company. That's what it's for. So people read that and then they're like, well, I don't work there. I'm not an employee there. I don't apply. But then it goes on to say, if you keep reading it, if no one applies, preference goes to non-traditional students. So I don't think they get very many applicants every year because people just read the first part and they're like, well, I don't qualify. That's a great example of, well, I kind of fit some of the criteria, but I don't fit all the criteria. So you have to read really closely. But there's another scholarship I know that's out there that I happen to be on the committee for, so I know this, where I get a lot of people that apply that we just have to reject probably maybe 50% off the bat, because we get a lot of people who just think, well, okay, I fit most of this, but I don't really fit, so I'm just going to apply. But it's things like, so it's really designed for maybe more traditional students who are commuting into campus. And one of the main criteria is, are you living at home with your parents? Do you live in Ottawa County? But we get a lot of people who live outside in other counties. We get people who are not living at home with their parents, who might be living on campus, but they just say, you know what, I'm just going to apply anyway. So they're missing 2 or 3 of those criteria and just apply anyways. We have to dismiss them. So you kind of have to read through to say what, because it's not just criteria. They won't just give bullet point criteria. They'll also say at the top of the scholarship, they'll say, who is this intended for? Who's the intended audience? So you kind of have to read to say, do I fit the intended audience? Yes or no? And do I meet the criteria? And if you can kind of answer mostly yes and mostly yes, even if not 100% yes, but maybe mostly yes, then I say absolutely go for it.
And Kate, I want to add to that, when you're looking at scholarships, if all of you all don't know how to look up scholarships on the Grand Valley's Financial Aid website, on that site, it has attribute buttons where you can put in non-traditional student, and it will bring up all of the scholarships for non-traditional students. You can put in your county that you live in. If you're Grand Rapids, if you're Muskegon, if you're up in Traverse City, you can put those in. You can put your GPA in, and you can filter out different scholarships so that you can read through them so it doesn't seem so overwhelming and massive. But what you want to do is I recommend that you do start, if you're looking at scholarships next year, now is not too early to begin filtering and reading those scholarships, because they're not going to all have the same deadline. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that. There are going to be different deadlines. Some of them may be a little later in the year. Some of them may come early in the year. But start now and just going through and reading the criteria to see, is this one that I meet? And this is the deadline that I need to be working from.
Great. Are there any other questions?
One quick question that often comes up is if we talk about how you could submit the majority of the answers. How do you make sure that you specify to that individual scholarship when you're submitting the same application to everyone?
So I think you have to tailor the scholarship essay to really speak to the criteria that the scholarship is requesting, right? So you can take your overall story, that concept, but really drive it and lean it towards the specifics of each scholarship. So you have to figure that you're going to tweak every essay. Your story doesn't change, it may not, but your essays may be tweaked a little bit along the way. And now is the time to start applying for scholarships. So they opened up October 1st. Some of them do have deadlines of March 1st. And like Sean said, sometimes when you filter out, you get a whole list and it can feel overwhelming. And we talk about just taking that list and taking chunks and moving through it, which is why you have a few months to do that. So I would encourage you to go into the gvsu.edu/my-scholarships database and submit your general application to get those scholarships filtered out and begin that process. Because again, there's a lot out there, and free money is the best kind of money, and you want to take advantage of what's out there.
Well, thank you all again for attending. This is our contact information, and on the website, you'll also have contact information for each of our 3 fabulous advisors that joined us today. So we will stay on until if there's any other additional questions that come up, but we appreciate all of your time and we look forward to hearing from everyone.